Hello? Okay.
Hello? Hello? Yes?
So now we're going to start the fireside chat. I'm really excited to speak with Rajeev about his experience being founder and CEO of Every, which is one of the new cool fintech startups. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Neethu. I'm a venture capitalist, angel investor, invest a lot in fintech, both in the US as well as abroad in Latin America and Africa. Hi, is this better? Okay, there we go. I was saying I'm a venture capitalist and angel investor. I've invested a lot in fintech, SaaS, in both the US as well as abroad. Rajeev's company, Every, is one of the companies that I got really interested in from a venture capitalist perspective, and they're accomplishing some really cool things. So let's have Rajeev introduce himself, and let's begin.
First, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Looks like a really fun event. My name is Rajeev Behera. I'm the founder of Every. What is Every? Every is a bank for startups. You probably heard that before. There's Mercury, there's Brex, there's SVB. But our core differentiator is we're built around a corporate treasury that gives you a 3% yield. Because right now it's really key philosophically to extend your runway with like the VC climate and kind of the stock market where it is today. What can you do to like make sure you have enough runway to get to your next goal for that fundraise? So we're really kind of philosophically focused on that.
So Rajeev, Every is not your first company. How did you end up becoming an entrepreneur?
I'm old folk. I turned 60 a month ago. No, I'm 40, but I think of myself as old as shit. But back 20 years ago when I came out of college, young people didn't start companies. It was like older people. So like I didn't think about it. I wanted to start a company, but I was like, I know I can't do it now. So I tried to like just get as much experience as I could. So I thought, like, what are the two things a founder needs? Literally the only two skills a founder needs is product skills. They need to build a product, and they need marketing skills. They have to market it, find the product market fit, position it. Those are like the key things. Like, you don't really need to know sales. You don't need to know customer success. You'll figure that stuff out. So I spent 8 years on marketing. I spent 3 years running product teams. Most recently, 12 years ago, I was at Disney, and I started their first free-to-play mobile gaming studio. And it was like when iPhones were brand new, and Disney didn't think mobile was going to be a big thing, and obviously it became a big thing. I started that group with like 5 people, me and 4 other engineers, and 2 years later, we had 22 million in revenue, and I had 85 people working for me. So that was my first start in product. Wow. Thank you. And then I got my first check from that. Someone from Disney gave me a check, and then they said, "Hey, you want to start a company?" And I was like, "Yes, now's my time." So then I started Reflektive. That's kind of my journey.
And Reflektive was scaled to 250 employees and also got 100 million raised in VC led by Andreessen. What were your biggest learnings in terms of like fundraising and scaling while you grew Reflektive?
Yeah, lots of big learning, lots of mistakes, right? Like, I don't know if you guys are first time, second time. First time, there's so much anxiety trying to figure out what you should do. And like, at the very beginning, it's all about finding product market fit, right? Like you keep talking to customers, you come up with a product, and hopefully something hits, right? As soon as that thing hits, you're just like gonna go on that journey wherever it goes, right? Like you're gonna have some like potential for that company. It's gonna get to 2 million total in revenue, 10, 20, 50, 100, but it is what it is. Like you're gonna have a curve, right? You're not gonna change that curve unless you pivot. And really, like you can get yourself to like 10 million in revenue just by like you hammering it out yourself. But after that, it's really your team, right? Like this has been said over and over again, your team matters, but like actually executing on that is really, really difficult. So, like a lot of my learnings are actually about like how to execute on that. So like, how do you create an A+ team? Well, like how do you hire? Like when you first start, you hire people you know. So you already know they're good because you know them or your coworker knows them. And that de-risks that whole thing. But as soon as you scale, like at Reflektive, we went from 0 to 1 million in ARR, 1 to 5 million in ARR, 5 to 12, and like 250 people in those 3-4 years kind of thing. You hire people you don't know. And it's hard to interview correctly and like know if someone's telling the truth, because anyone can say they do anything, right? So like, how do you actually know like if you're just a good interviewer or if you're actually good at what you do? You could say you're hardworking and sound like you really are hardworking and then come to the job and not work, right? So like, how do you figure that out? I found like the biggest hack for me was back channeling people. So like, I mean, I tried all the things, tried to figure out like all the questions you should ask, how to do it, behavioral interviews, technical interviews. In the end, the best like silver bullet for me was like, okay, who did you work for? Who are your peers? And I would just reach out to them on LinkedIn and talk to them. And I'd verify what they said, basically. Like most people say, hey, I was head of blah, blah, blah. And then you talk to their boss and they're like, yeah, they're one of the 10 people working on this. And you kind of figure out like what actually happened and you get the truth out of it. So that was one of my hacks. That worked really well. There are other things there. Like my biggest thing that like my mentors have taught me is just follow your gut in an interview, right? Like even if you're like not exactly sure why like someone makes you feel off, if you feel off by anyone you're talking to, just axe it. Like say no. It's not going to work out. And every time I've had like some bad feeling about someone, it's just not worked out. So part of it's hiring. The other part actually, which no one really talks about, is firing, right? Like you're not going to always make the right decision. You're not always going to hire an A+ person. And you can't have like a lot of B players for one reason. Like the A players don't like working with B players and then they just leave. So I've had a few groups become B groups because like they got infiltrated with too many B players. So like, I think what you actually have to do is have the guts to fire people. And I didn't have the guts at Reflektive to fire people, but it was one of my biggest learnings from that company, where I had a few groups that just like weren't the best groups. I had a lot of groups that were A players, but some groups were not. So like, at Every, we're a pretty small team. Unfortunately, I had fired like 5 people already. And I probably didn't even fire 5 people at the whole, like during the whole 7 years at Reflektive. But like, you just got to do it. You'll never want to do it. It's not a fun conversation. But like when you do it, your team actually respects you more because they know like, hey, that guy sucked. Like I did not want to work with that person. And it ends up just making the company a lot better. And that's what you need. You need an excellent team to do well.
Thank you. That's really good advice. What was your inspiration for starting Every? And like, tell us a little bit about what Every is and your target customer, what you're building.
Yeah. Oh, we forgot to go over fundraising. Should you want to do that?
We can talk about fundraising now. I mean, I feel like if we devote time talking about like fundraising in this market, it might go a little bit longer. But yeah, we can touch on it.
Okay, well, there was a question about fundraising.
Sure. Like, what are your biggest fundraising tips? And what are your biggest fundraising tips? And I guess like advice in surviving in a downturn market.
Oh, great question.
Not at all prompted.
Yeah, I mean, fundraising. There's such a big difference between a founder who can fundraise and one that can and can't. And it's all storytelling. Like literally, like life is about storytelling, right? Like even if you work at a company, the difference between a manager, a director, and a VP, like half of it's storytelling. The raising money, it's storytelling. Do you have a good story? So you obviously have to have a really easy, simple story people can follow. But besides that, you have to have a really good process too. So like everyone has a different process. My process was based off the philosophy that VCs are sheep, right? And like people have talked about this, like what makes a VC move? The biggest thing that makes one VC move is another VC moving, right? Like, because it kind of makes sense. If you're seed stage, A stage company, you don't really have any traction. Like even if you feel like, oh, I have $1 million in AR, that's not really traction. Even if you have 5 million in AR, that's not really traction. Because like real companies have like 100 million, 50 million in ARR, right? So like, it's hard for a VC to know what's going to actually work. So they go off what their friends are saying. Like they literally are on Telegram telling each other like, hey, I saw this company. And the more Telegram hits they get, you're going to get deal heat out of that. But like, I think the goal is you want to get to create deal heat. Like, how do you get everyone interested at the exact same time? So they're all talking about it at the same time. So really, it's all about timing. So what I would do is, at least this is how I did it. I would just do coffee dates with people first, with a ton of VCs, and I would do it before I had to fundraise. Because as soon as you have to fundraise and you're selling a VC, they don't trust you, right? Like if a sales guy comes to your door, do you like trust the sales guy? No, he's just trying to sell you something, right? As soon as you're like in sales mode trying to raise money, you probably know this, VCs like don't trust you because they know you're going to bullshit half of what you're saying because entrepreneurs bullshit. That's like half of what makes a VC job hard. So like you meet them like when you're not raising money, when like you're a person to them and not an entrepreneur. And then like you can have a good conversation with them and you can actually relate to them and they'll like get comfortable with you. Half of it is them being comfortable with you. So you do all that and then you do that until you have enough people interested. And then when you have enough people interested where you think you could like get a herd of sheep to like get started with you, then you like push one over the edge. And then when that person's over the edge, you email all the rest of them and you say, I'm close to getting a term sheet. Do you want to take a look? Sorry, this happened so quickly. And then everyone just moves really quickly because FOMO is like how you get a VC to move forward. But you have to create the FOMO. If it's one person and there's no one else in the herd, they're not going to follow.
I'm not sure how much I appreciate VCs being compared to sheep, but I will say
not you, present company excluded.
I will say that the VC FOMO thing is completely accurate, and that is pretty good advice. Like, I mean, I've definitely heard of like the companies are being hyped and everyone's talking about it, maybe on Telegram, maybe on Twitter, but no, I think that's solid advice. Do you have any specific advice about dealing with the downturn in the markets right now and, valuations being compressed, things like that? Like what sort of advice would you give to founders who are now afraid that they're essentially going to be lowballed the next time they fundraise?
Yeah, I would say, well, my wife's a partner at YC. So I listen to like what YC tells people. And like what they tell people makes sense to me, actually. They tell their founders, make sure you have enough runway for 2 years. There's a good chance you will not raise in the next 2 years. So map that out and do the math for it, right? Which means raise enough, or if you have money, you're not raising more, see how much you have, and then look at your burn rate, cut your burn, and like get to make sure you can last for 2 years and do the spreadsheet exercise. And that means like, if you do have those B players now, like now you have to cut the B players. It's going to force you to do it. So you have to do stuff like that. You can't overspend on things. Be super focused on like your core market to get revenue to help with your burn rate. And just like streamline your processes. Like your operational processes really matter now. You can't be like hey, we're cool, we're not organized, but we're cool and we're gonna have this cool product. No, you actually have to be a well-oiled machine, and your internal processes have to be really tight, and you have to be really efficient. So I think that's kind of the key. You want to save money, and I mean that's one thing that like we're focused on at Every. We're trying to help people with extending their runway, but I think that's kind of one of the key things that needs to be focused on.
Yeah, I'll say like the post-seed funding gap, and a lot of companies do, need like seed extensions and extension rounds, and that happens quite often. It's a tricky market to have that in. So if there's any way to extend your runway, cut your burn, reduce those yacht parties and those summer picnics if needed, now would be a time to do so. Okay, so I think this is a natural segue to like talking a little bit more about Every and kind of like your inspiration behind starting the company and what you guys are up to.
Yeah, after I sold Reflektive, I sat on the sidelines for 2 years, and I had a kid, and then just kind of hung out with my kid for a while, and then COVID hit, and then I just saw like, boom, like tech just started going freaking nuts, right? Like you see like earnings calls for Facebook and Google, and everything's just like kicking ass. And then you start seeing private companies raising like billions of dollars at $1 billion valuations, and like like Coinbase was worth like 100 billion at some point or something like that. And it was just like tech was exciting. Like a long time ago, like there's this like quote from A16's Mark Andreessen saying software is eating the world. And like, yeah, maybe a little bit back then, but then like during COVID, it was to me, it was like, wow, it actually is like the future. And if you think about like the US economy, it was basically like supported by tech, right? Like the stock market would have completely collapsed if it wasn't for like the tech giants and like tech companies. So I'm like, tech is like amazing for like the US. And so I just wanted to get involved with tech again. But I didn't want to be an investor for reasons stated previously. So I was like, how do I support founders? And like when I look around the room here, it's like, there might be like $5 billion companies in the making here. Like, how cool is that, right? Like, I love supporting dreamers like who are willing to like have the courage just to like try it, because it's hard to try it, right? Like most of the time you're just gonna fail, and you're hoping you're gonna have to fake it till you make it, but it's a hard landing when you fail. So my goal basically is like, how do I support you guys? And like I wanted to build. I didn't want to invest, but I wanted to like create. I know everyone wants to build a best-in-class startup. So like my goal was like, can I set everyone up with like all their processes so that they can be a best-in-class startup and basically take over their HR and finance and all of that stuff and build it with awesome processes so that they can focus on, I want you guys to focus on product market fit, like product, customers, that's it. Like not like all this admin stuff. So like, that's going to be the best way to do it. Cause I spent so much of my time on that stuff. I would say like 40% of my time was like chasing down random tasks and like odd jobs. I was like the odd job guy. Like, I don't know if you guys are like this, but as CEO, like if you don't have every role built in your company, you do that extra role. You're the kitchen sink, right? Like you do like the crap work. Like if no one's building the desk, you get in, you build the desk. If the printer's broken, you fix the fucking printer, right? Like that, you have to do everything. So like if I could make that a little less painful, that's the goal.
And I hesitate to ask this, but why Every over companies like or products like Brooks, SVB, Gusto, Bill.com? What makes you different and better?
We're way better than all those companies. Well, we're basically all in one, right? Like, and we're built with best practices. So like I took all the stuff I learned at my last company, I'm building the processes into these products and not just like the products, basically. So, and we're building a fuck ton of stuff really quickly. So we started with banking. We launched a full Gusto competitive product, like payroll onboarding. Next month, we're launching incorporation for companies who haven't incorporated. 3 months after that, we're doing spend management to automate all your QuickBooks stuff. Like we're just going to build everything, but we're going to build everything like best in class. So like, the goal is like, it's all just in one place. You fill out one thing and it's done everywhere. But I mean, in general, it's like, we want you to build a best in class startup, but we also want to extend your runway and we want you to like grow the funding you do get and give yourself more time for the next round. But it's a tough market. There's a lot of good companies out there. I have a lot of respect for those companies. So they're all great.
Well, awesome. And just last question, which is a bit of a fun one. Who is one entrepreneur that inspires you?
I would say like my like the guy like I put on a pedestal the most is probably Jeff Bezos, the Amazon CEO or former now Amazon CEO. I think about like what Amazon did, like, like most people say you get your wedge and then you expand a little bit. His wedge was like, no one even remembers his wedge. It was like books, I think. I think it was a Kindle. And then like then he used that books to like take over the internet, basically, right? And like, the shit he built was so hard to build. Like if you think about like building Facebook versus building Amazon, Facebook is like a simple social like app with like nothing else besides like the software. Super simple to build. Amazon has all these crazy ass supply chains and like all these completely different verticals. And they like solved like this crazy like warehousing like thing where they have warehouses everywhere. Like isn't it crazy? You can get anything you want in 2 days. Like that is way harder than like, how do I optimize my news feed, right? Or like the stuff he built was just so next level, and his wedge was just books, and then he just did everything else. So he's my guy. I would have said Elon Musk before everything happened recently. But, you know.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for coming here and chatting with us. And you gave really good advice. And I hope everyone goes and looks at every.io, and they have a really cool product. I know I was poking around and signed up and told my friends to as well. So hopefully it helps some of you guys with your startups. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a good night.
I just wanted to mention, while we have is that Founders was just using every.io. So we are customers.
Yes, we're a customer as well.
Yay!